The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.
And now, it's time for Radio Jobline with your host, Scott Possessor, right here on 103.9 LI News Radio.
Welcome, everybody. It must be Saturday afternoon from 2 to 3 p.m., or it might be Wednesday night from 9 to 10 p.m. We're on twice a week to talk about your career, look at the talent pools, look at the job market, look at the workplace. We discuss every issue related to being successful on this show and every issue related to success and getting a job. So basically, that's what this show is all about if you're a first-time listener, although that would mean that you haven't heard my show in 34 years. So that's not good, but I'm glad that you've joined us. We're going to talk a little bit today about the CEO Confidence Index. This is something I'm very proud of because I've developed a relationship with a person I like to call my friend, Jeff Oak, who represents a great organization that does a very deep, comprehensive poll of CEOs every quarter. And they come up with information that you can't really get anywhere else. And I know they partner with the Wall Street Journal, but as far as radio shows, we may be the only radio show in the universe that has this information. So stay tuned. A lot of great stuff coming up today. My guest is Jeff Oak. Jeff is a Vistage Chair, which means that he has the privilege of working with Long Island CEOs and business owners who are hungry, humble, and smart, and who want to strengthen their companies, families, and communities. Jeff is an executive coach, leadership consultant, and trusted advisor with 30 years of experience leading small, medium, and large companies. Vistage, his company, Vistage Worldwide, it was founded 65 years ago and has 45,000 members in 35 countries. It's the oldest and largest organization for CEOs of small to mid-sized companies. In 2020, at the height of the pandemic, Vistage member companies grew their annual revenue by 4.6%, while non-member companies saw revenue decline by 4.7%, according to a study of Dun & Bradstreet data. So you really should get on board here with Vistage. Created in 2003, the Vistage CEO Confidence Index, the star of today's show, has grown to be the largest and most comprehensive report of the opinions and projections from CEOs of small to mid-sized businesses, a trusted barometer for the economic outlook of our nation's small business leaders on topics such as economic sentiment, employment, capital expenditures, and revenue and profit expectations of small and mid-sized businesses. Analysis demonstrates that the index is a leading indicator of the U.S. Industrial Production Index 9 months in advance. Very, very interesting. Vistage partners, as I said, with the Wall Street Journal on a quarterly report. Jeffrey Oak, welcome to Radio Jobline.
My pleasure to be here, Scott.
Thanks for having me on that video that you recorded recently in cooperation with Vistage that focused on me, which I was happy to do, and also we talked about Westies. You know, the root.
We did.
The root of our relationship. I got to see your two beautiful Westies on the screen. So hope they're doing well. And Jeff, what's been disturbing me lately, and I hope the CEO Index is going to add some clarity to this and perhaps give some future forecasting that makes sense to the listeners. But I have not been liking what I'm hearing lately about the economy, the job market, which has been the anchor of our economy, has suddenly started producing less jobs. So I think last month we produced 130,000 jobs compared to 300,000, 400,000 that we've been producing. So that was not good to see. I'm hearing a lot about the R word again, which, Jeff, I can't stand it. I'm going to go back 40 months. We're talking about a recession now for 40 months. When can we shut up about this topic? And when does the economy get back on its feet and move forward? So people are hearing stagflation, a word that many are not even familiar with. So right now, things don't look great. At least that's what the average American is thinking. That's what I'm thinking. That's what people in our region here in New York are thinking. So what I'd like you to do, Jeff, is give me your take on where we are now, and then ease us into the confidence index.
Thank you, Scott, for that intro and that preamble. And I'm going to inject a little bit of optimism.
Oh, good.
Or maybe a little bit less pessimism. Jobs reports are very, very important, and there are lots of other indicators in the economy. What I'll agree with you a bit, although I'm going to articulate it in a little different way. If we step back and look at the last 4 to 5 years, we had a devastating set of events globally in the form of COVID. Mm-hmm. And if we think of the economy as an athlete, the economy sustained a really serious injury in the COVID activities. And just like any athlete can't just go to the doctor once or twice and then be out on the field or the courts or on the ice, athletes have to work their way back. And the way I think about the economy at this juncture is that there's been some really rigorous rehab to get the economy back to a minimum level of performance. Mm-hmm. And I believe there are indicators, actually it's not just me believing, CEOs are, there's less pessimism out there among small business CEOs. If we stick with the athlete analogy, there's been some great rehab, and there's still a long path to get from where we are to being having an Olympic athlete level economy again. Mm-hmm. The pandemic inflicted injuries, and the economy is continuing to recover. So I actually think there's some cautiously good news here.
Okay, and we'll get into it and look.
Say why I think that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, first of all, CEOs are telling us that they are less pessimistic. Does that mean they're brimming with optimism? Maybe not, but less pessimism is the first step toward actually being optimistic. Fewer and fewer CEOs are saying that they think the economy is going to get worse, which is a little different from what some of the media is telling us right now. Mm-hmm. They believe that profitability and revenue, 6 out of 10 CEOs expect revenue to increase. That's the biggest increase in CEO confidence regarding revenue and profitability in 2 years. That's a big deal. We're not seeing news stories about that, but that's what our data is showing from CEOs themselves.
Oh, of course, that's wonderful. Keep going. That's wonderful.
Okay. CEOs are evenly divided about their plans to increase the workforce. About half of CEOs are going to be increasing their workforce, and half are not. So the glass is both, you can say the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that the glass is half full. Having said all that, cost pressures, the biggest underlying factor at any time when there are cost pressures is wages. That's still a big challenge for small and medium-sized companies. Owners have a little bit more leverage when it comes to hiring. There was a time not so long ago where there were twice as many job openings as there were people looking for jobs. Now it's more like 3 to 2. The ratio is 3 to 2. Mm-hmm. So not great, but still improving. So I think the athlete, that is our economy. We've had some intensive rehab. We're not back at peak performance yet, but the intensive rehab is drawing to a close, I'd like to think.
All right, so let's compare it to Tommy John surgery. So we've had the surgery, right? We moved some cartilage from some other part of your body to your elbow. That's got a 12 to 18 month recuperation time, and then you've got to work yourself back into shape. Just because you complete the surgery doesn't mean you're well. So that could take another 6 months, another 12 months. But this has been going on a long time, Jeff. This is one of my problems, with being a talk show host and having to represent people and inspire and talk to people, is that we just keep talking about the same thing. Over and over again. It's the recession. Well, the market is up because we didn't have enough job creation and all, but it never seems like, I don't even remember what it used to be like in the media or in any sense, when the economy was flying high. You just take it for granted. You don't look at it. You're not looking at any numbers. You're not looking at any economic indicators. You're just kind of going with the flow. Things are expanding. Things are moving forward. But I've seen now 4 years of malaise. So I'm delighted to hear that CEOs who are giving us really a look into a crystal ball 9 months away are less pessimistic and more optimistic about what's happening in the economy. Maybe give us some numbers.
There were. I'll go back to a couple that I mentioned and really underscore them.
Mm-hmm.
CEOs are at the front line, and they're just less pessimistic. Let's take a look at the CEO confidence in its totality, and the numbers this quarter. The CEO confidence has improved for 4 straight quarters. 4 straight quarters, their confidence has improved.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based on where we were getting up to the point where we were at the bottom. That was the bottom, a decade ago. Where we are now is where the economy was at its bottom 10 years ago. I think we got to take a look at the long view.
Mm-hmm.
Is that great news? No, but 4 quarters of improvement in CEO confidence is a piece of good news. Fewer of them think the economy is going to worsen. Fewer of them. There are still some who think that, but many more are hopeful about where things are going. And then 3 out of 5 CEOs are expecting revenue and profitability to improve.
All right. So the obvious question would be
good news for workers.
All good news, Jeff. All good news. But my question is, what's driving that? What is making the CEO of today think that things are better? Where is the what's driving it?
The performance of their business. Their ability to access talent,
mm-hmm.
Their ability to enter markets, their ability to innovate. Again, this is not a parade, and that's where I think we got to take the long view. We've never one of the things that I was hearing you say, Scott, is we've been talking about this for a long time. Seemingly the same thing for 4 years. I agree. That's a great point. And we went through an unprecedented event in the form of COVID. Never has our economy faced something like COVID. We lose sight of that. We lose sight of the blow, the devastating blow to the economy that COVID was.
Yeah, it wasn't just the economy; it was the supply chain too. I mean, you still to this day, Jeff, go into a store and your favorite brand of whatever it is you're looking for is not on the shelf. So I think the damage to the supply chain looks as though it's permanent. I mean, I hope it's not. I hope it comes back and, we get everything moving again. We have bridges collapsing in Baltimore, destroying the supply chain. I mean, it's a very fragile thing. I don't think people in the United States actually heard the expression supply chain too much, before this COVID thing. So COVID was bad enough, killed 1 million Americans, killed God knows how many people all over the country, made everybody sick. But I think like you said, the damage is done. I mean, we're healing from it, but it was severe. It was really severe. And it was hard to say at the time how severe it was, because it was hard to, kind of get your head above the quicksand and look outside and see what was going on. It was that bad.
Yeah. So I think there's a comment about the supply chain. So we learned a very, very hard lesson about supply chain during COVID. And let me give some context. There was a time when inventory, people held a lot of stuff in inventory. And that was good because stuff was available. It was sometimes challenging financially because there was a lot of money sitting on the shelves. So over a period of time prior to COVID, there was a transition in mindset, and you'll remember this, Scott, what's called just-in-time inventory.
Oh, sure.
If you expect to sell 5 widgets, you want to keep 5 on the shelf. You don't want to keep 10 or 15 or 20 because that's money sitting on the shelf. You only want to keep as much as you think you're going to sell today. What's good about that? Economic efficiency. Money's not sitting on the shelf. What's bad about that is you have something unexpected or unprecedented like COVID come along. Just-in-time inventory did not serve us well. Just take the example of masks. That's just a very simple example. You remember how hard it was to get masks?
Yeah.
How hard it was to get a lot of things. It's because that just-in-time inventory, which before COVID everybody thought was a great idea, turned out to be not such a great idea. And people are rethinking that notion of just-in-time inventory in light of some of the lessons learned from COVID. So supply chain is a great example of the blow of COVID, and that some of our conventional thinking around supply chain and what a good thing it was to have not a whole lot of stuff on your shelves. Well, there are limitations to that, and COVID revealed those limitations.
Yeah, one of the things that that was difficult for everybody is that we didn't all understand at the beginning the damage that this could cause, the havoc that it could wreak. I mean, people didn't understand, and so when you couldn't get paper towel or toilet paper or something like that, it was like almost like a joke. But to this day, Jeff, prices have still not come down, even though inflation is improving and it's not the giant number that it was. And in fact, it dropped, I think, from March to April by 0.1% or something like that. But
yep.
But the bottom line is I go to the grocery store, I am still spending $50 a week more than I did 4 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, and inflation is continues to be a problem. You're correct. It does seem to be abating, does seem to be improving, but it's still stubbornly high. And when you say why is it that CEOs are more confident than they've been for 4 consecutive quarters? Because CEOs have to look at all of these factors. They have to look at supply chain. They have to look at the cost of goods. They have to look at the cost of labor. They have to look at profitability, because the CEOs, especially small and mid-sized company CEOs, they're the heroes of the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
They are the ones who are managing, and they're on the front lines. They're at the tip of the spear. And if you want to know what's really happening in an enterprise, you go to the people at the tip of the spear and you ask them what they think. And that's what the Vistage CEO Confidence Index tells us, is what those people at the tip of the spear are thinking. It's looking at all of these factors in their totality.
All right, so we have a second segment coming up. We're going to talk a little bit about succession planning, which is a fascinating subject and something that I think is on the mind of CEOs. I also wanted, Jeff, if you could just give people a website for Vistage.
Sure. www.vistage.com. V as in Victor, ISTAGE. VISTAGE.com.
Okay, great. We have some business to do, and then we're gonna come back and talk more to Jeff Oak, who is fabulous on this radio show and should have his own radio show. If you'd like to be a guest on Radio Jobline, you can write to me, Scott P 118 at gmail.com. Scott P 118 at gmail.com. Happy to have you or your idea on the radio program. Also, I want you to connect with me on LinkedIn, PASSESER, because I post all Radio Joblines after they broadcast here at the studio. I post them on my LinkedIn account. So if you're connected, there's no reason for you to miss any of these Radio Joblines. You wouldn't want to miss what Jeff just said, which is really breaking news, that CEOs are more confident. We have another segment coming up. We got news coming up. Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.
May the four winds blow you safely home. Roll away.
And now, welcome back to Radio Jobline with your host, Scott Possessor, right here on LI News Radio.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Radio Jobline with Scott Possessor, and we are with Jeff Oak today from Vistage International, a company that does something called the CEO Confidence Index, which is honestly a really great economic indicator. And I won't be happy until it's one of the 8 or now 9 economic indicators associated with the economy. Jeff just gave us a real, not maybe a super positive, but a more positive outlook from the CEO Confidence Index, and we compared it to a super athlete that's healing, and it's still healing. And I thought that was a great comparison. Jeff, do you have any more about the CEO Confidence Index before we move on to succession planning?
No, I think you asked some great questions, and I think we covered that well.
Okay. So succession planning. Now I know just about everything worries a CEO, but one of them in particular is succession planning. Like I look at my company, for example, Jeff, at one time my boss had asked me to do a little research on succession planning, come up with a sort of a proposal or even a PowerPoint, on how we're going to do it, who we're going to put in what role, depending on what happens to this person, that person. But we have a relatively small company. There are companies out there with 500,000, 10,000, 100,000 employees, so must be much different for them. Give us an overview of why succession planning is so important and why is it on the mind of CEOs?
Yes. Thank you, Scott. And I want to provide a little context. You know this about me, Scott, that while the CEO Confidence is all about data, I'm really interested in not only what is the data saying, what does it mean, and what do we do with the information? How do we act on it? And I'm going to shift, and I call that, you've heard me say this before, Scott, I call that the what, the so what, and the now what. The what is the data. The so what is what does it mean. And the now what is, okay, what do we do with the information? And each quarter in the CEO Confidence Index, we dig into what does the data mean that we need to be taking some action on. And there was some data in this quarter's survey that highlighted the importance of succession planning and some concerning things as it relates to succession planning. So a little bit of context. We hear a lot about strategic planning, which in essence is, where does the business want to be 3 to 5 years from now, and what will it take to get there? So strategic planning is the groundwork, is the foundation. Succession planning focuses on, okay, what people do we need to get that done, to achieve that strategy? So succession planning is an element of strategic planning. How do we get the right people in the organization? How do we get those right people on the bus and in the right seats? And then how do we get that bus going in the right direction with those people? Succession planning at its heart is the orderly transition of leadership and management within an organization. Anytime an organization is contemplating any kind of change, whether it's exit planning or responding to market conditions or what have you, you got to focus on four big things. You got to focus on the financials. You got to focus on the legal landscape. You got to focus on operational issues, and you got to focus on your people, and making sure you got those people in the bus and in the right seats and driving the bus in the right direction. So that's a high-level summary of succession planning. And Scott, you always have good questions and observations. Let me just pause to hear if you've got any at this point.
Well, I think you've got two elements here. You've got the large company and you've got the small company. So there are Long Island, where we live, Jeff, is a small business economy. You got 83,000 companies, I hear, but only 900 with more than 100 employees. So, the lion's share of the companies on Long Island have less than 100 employees, and most of those have less than 50, and quite a bit of those have less than 20 employees. Yep. So succession planning actually requires that you deal with your own mortality, Jeff. It's like people don't want to do it. My boss, who's in his late 60s, would rather not talk about it. He doesn't want to talk about what happens if I die, or get his sons involved, or anything like that. So I think it's a difficult subject for the small company, and then the larger company. It's a complicated subject because you got to have the right talent in place, or the company isn't going to move forward. So I think there's a lot to this.
Yeah. You raised two really good points. It's hard for us human beings to contemplate a world that doesn't include us. Right? Mm-hmm. It's harder for running a company to contemplate what that company looks like when you're the CEO if you're not there anymore. So you're right. It's very difficult in any circumstance for an individual to contemplate who is going to succeed me. The second thing that I like about what you said, Scott, is it particularly hard for small and mid-sized companies, which is the vast majority of companies on Long Island, as you rightly point out. Mm-hmm. And here's one of the reasons why we have focused on this topic in this quarter's CEO Confidence Index data. Small and mid-sized companies don't have the luxury of what I'll call next man up. In the NBA, in the National Football League, in the National Hockey League, you've got a ton of talent. Somebody gets hurt, next man up. You get next woman up off of the bench. The people are there, and to some extent that also applies in the very large companies, 10,000 employees and above. There's a lot of talent. You got leaders stacked up like cordwood. You
right.
Take another log off the pile and throw it into the roll. Large companies have the luxury of having plenteous talent that the next man up philosophy works. But in small and mid-sized companies, as you brilliantly point out, don't have that luxury. They're thin on leaders. Many CEOs of small companies are wearing multiple hats. All the leaders are wearing multiple hats. And so in some respects, it's even more important, more critical for small and mid-sized companies to engage in the hard but really difficult work of succession planning.
So I hope you're going to give us a couple of tips, but what do you do, Jeff, if say you have a company that does $4 million a year and they've got a dozen employees and you don't have anybody on your staff right now, Jeff, that you could trust to run the company? What goes through the CEO's mind at that point?
Well, I can tell you what should go through the CEO's mind is I need to develop my people. And I need to look in the mirror and say, okay, what if I get hit? My mother used to talk about, when she gets hit by the ice cream truck, get hit by a bus. The CEO needs to contemplate, if something unexpected happens, what decisions do I need to make now to reduce the risk to the company? I work with a lot of companies, Scott, for whom they haven't done succession planning, or it was not done well, it was not done comprehensively. And when there's an unexpected transition, whether through illness or death or some unexpected circumstance, those companies, it's an existential threat. Their survival is at risk. And so the way I would encourage CEOs to think is, what is in the best interest of your company and of your people, so that if the unexpected happens, the company can move forward. So those CEOs, they need to focus on developing their people.
So that means training, enrichment, cross-training, cross-functional teams. What are you actually talking about there?
Talking about all that and more.
Okay.
Let me just give some data that underscores the criticality of this. Only 15%, 15% of small and mid-sized CEOs have identified their successor. That
does not surprise me.
And it's a worrisome thing. Mm-hmm. And only 1 out of 5 have even identified successors on their leadership team. Who's gonna do the book if something happens, to my finance person? Right. Only 1 out of 5.
Right.
And so, and this is from the mouth of CEOs. This is self-reported data from CEOs. So it's probably worse than that, if you ask me. So let me step back and give the wider context. Small and mid-sized companies, I don't need to tell you, Scott, being the CEO or the owner of the company, it's a constant climb. The weight falls on the CEO or the owner's shoulders, and it never lets up. They're accountable for the success of the company, but a lot of times those CEOs, they don't feel like they got stuff in their control. They're trying to lead the organization into the future, but they're up to the eyeballs, in the day-to-day. They've got so many priorities. Those priorities often conflict. They gotta perform, but the market conditions are constantly changing. And so it's really tough to be a business owner, a CEO in the small business sector for all of these reasons.
And I think not to interrupt, Jeff, but I think that's another reason why they're not doing it, because they're so busy surviving. Right? Everybody is scrimping and for that next piece of business and trying to, work against the economy and move everything forward despite the lagging economy. And so one more reason to ignore this whole succession planning thing is because, hey, I got to make it to next week. I got to make it to next month. I got to make payroll, So some people are living from check to check, to be able to make payroll. So of course those people aren't too worried about succession planning because they may not be around next year.
Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. And one of the fundamental principles of Vistage is that CEOs need, hard as it is, they need to exercise the discipline and make the tough decision to work on the business and not just in the business. They've got to get out of the weeds, lift the head, and think strategically. Otherwise, their company is going to be at risk, in the long run. So couldn't agree more that it's difficult, and that makes it even more important that CEOs do it.
So we've got to we've got to look at hiring then, Jeff, because as people go forward, and you're now you haven't done much on succession planning. You have a successful business, but you don't know how long it's going to last. When you hire people, you've got to be looking for leaders, and you've got to be looking for the potential leader. Right. So when next time you're making a hire, those of you out there that are recruiting, you got to start looking at who's going to take over, who's going to take over the financial functions, who's going to take over the marketing functions, sales, and who's going to take over the leadership of the company. So I think, one way we can combat the malaise around succession planning is to do better with our hiring.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. And there's nobody better to talk about that than you. And, I'm sure you've dealt with companies, and your firm, this is what it does. When you hire, we used to call something called, stepping up when you hire. So hiring someone who's not only suited to do the current role that needs to be filled, but who have the potential to do more, either more in their area of specialty or more in the way of different roles. And that's hard to do. And as you suggest, it's important to do. It's imperative to do.
All right. So now let's switch over to big companies. And because I have a theory on this that's probably wrong, and I hope you'll correct me. So I'm thinking of X. I'm thinking of Tesla. I'm thinking of Elon Musk. Okay. And somebody, he's got to be looking for his replacement at some point, because not only do they age out, but sometimes they just don't want to work anymore and they want someone else to run the business for them. But the question that I have is, are CEOs looking for someone in their own image, Jeff? Does Elon Musk want an Elon Musk clone, or does he want somebody completely different, or doesn't he care about that and he just wants somebody with the skill set?
Well, I'm certainly not going to try to predict Elon Musk,
right,
or what he's doing or should be doing. But let me what I will say is some suggestions for how CEOs ought to think about it. So I think it's a mistake for a CEO just to look for a clone of themselves. It's important to look at what the company needs at the moment in time when that is needed. As you know, Scott, I serve on a number of boards, and I'm on the executive committee of a board right now. And one of the things, and we hired a president a number of years ago, and that president was completely different from the president before him. Both of them are beloved. Both of them were effective in their own ways, and they could not have been more different. Because what the organization needed 15 years ago was completely different from what it needed 4 years ago when we hired our current president. And so the wise CEO is going to be looking for leadership that will complement her or him, maybe bring a different set of skills than what she or he brought, to continue to move the company forward. And CEOs aren't always, left to their own devices. Some CEOs, let me put it positively. CEOs would benefit from having other outside perspectives to help them think about what the organization may need going forward. In some cases, they're family businesses where the priority is, someone in the family to continue the business. Sometimes that can work well. Sometimes that doesn't work so well. Sometimes people fill positions. They hire CEOs from within. Other times it's necessary to go outside. I don't think one size fits all, but different organizations need different things at different times.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine there's an ego thing involved in this as well, Jeff, and people who have been successful running a $500 million company, they're starting to think, well, I'm funny, I should get someone that's funny. I'm got a quick wit, maybe I should get someone with a quick wit. So I think it's hard to look away from your own skills, personality traits, and values when you're trying to replace yourself. So I think that makes it very complicated. Is this something, Jeff, that you help people do? We got a couple of minutes left, and I want to talk about the various groups that you have.
Sure. Yes, it is something that we do. So I'm building a group for C-suite executives. As you know, I have two groups of CEOs. This group would be for those who report to the CEO, finance leaders, human resource leaders, marketing leaders, quality leaders, IT leaders, to help strengthen the bench for the CEO, give some bench strength, to help improve the CEO's effectiveness and deliver value across the organization. So the value of this key executive group is that, let me tell you the value that it gives to the CEO and the value that it gives to the key executive. The value that it gives to the CEO is that it helps prepare the individuals who report to the CEO, helps those key executives to move more seamlessly into whatever their next role is. This program that I'm launching helps prepare those leaders, and that helps the CEO. It gives the CEO and his or her direct reports shared language. It helps their alignment.
All right, we're almost out of time, Jeff. Wait, before we go, I want people to, how do they contact you if they're interested in joining?
Jeff Oak on LinkedIn, and my email is jeff.oak, jeff.oak like a tree at vistagechair.com.
I highly recommend that you look into this if you're looking for training to get you even higher up the ladder. Jeff Oak, thank you so much for being with us. Unfortunately, we're out of time. If you want to be on Radio Jobline, write to me, scottp118@gmail.com. Happy to have you on the show. We'll be back with another great show next week. Happy hunting, everybody.
Your eyes looked from your mother's face, wildflower seed in the sand and snow.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.